Hello! Welcome to another episode of Wicked Easy Cooking. Today we're making wicked easy sous vide pork chops with a brown sugar spice rub. Yum, yum, yum. Easy recipe, and it's going to be one of the most tender, juicy, plump pork chops I bet you've ever seen. Easy to make, so let's get started. Okay, so I have the recipe here, which I will post at the end of the video, so you can make this at home if you wish. Now, these pork chops, because I'm going to be cooking them in my immersion circulator in the water, sous vide, there's no reason to brine them now. They're already going to stay so moist, so plump, so juicy. And the other great advantage to that is you can't overcook them. So if you're tired of dry, stringy, tough pork chops that maybe you've had in the past, done. No more of that. Do it sous vide. Okay, this way here, if it's an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, you can't really overcook them. You can just leave them in there. So this recipe, I think, is going to show you some great techniques to do that. And it's for two, but it's easy. You can double it, triple it, whatever you'd like. Maybe you're going to have a big dinner party. So let's get started. As you see in the recipe, we have these bone-in pork chops. So I bought these, 2 of them, really cheap. It's like $3.50 a pound. For these 2 chops, it only cost me under $7, like $3.50 each. This is going to feed a family of 4 or 5 with my youngest son. I mean, who's going to eat that whole chop? Especially when you're not going to get any real shrinkage from it. So what we got to do is get our spice rub on these and then get them into our bag and get them cooking. So let's do that. For the recipe for these 2 chops, I'm going to have 1 teaspoon of salt and about a half a teaspoon of black pepper. Then over here we have brown sugar, half a teaspoon, somewhere in that range. Then we're going to have our seasonings. So I have garlic powder and onion powder. I got them both of those in here, about a quarter of a teaspoon of each. Then in here I have cumin. You could use chili powder if you want. I also have some paprika. You could use smoked paprika, which will give it a nice flavor. You could use Spanish, Hungarian. Spanish one's a little bit usually more spicier. Any paprika that you have. And also some dry mustards in here. Okay, so we're going to add all of that in. And that's it. Now we just stir it all up together, and we're going to rub this all over these pork chops. We want to get it on all sides. This prevents you from having to brine it. If you're cooking this like on a grill normally, you're going to smoke them. You have to put this on, let it sit for 24 hours or so. But you don't have to, because in this case, the pork chops are going to be in the bag. Some of the liquid's going to come out. It's going to mix with this rub, and then as it cooks, it's going to draw that into the meat. So we don't have to do it in advance or any of that. So we'll just take this, put it on each chop. Rub it in a little bit here. I'm going to turn it over. Put the rest on. And then just get your hands in there and go to work. Really rub it into the meat. Get it on all sides of it. Pick it up off the plate here. It'll stick to the fat on the outside of it. And get it all rubbed in there. Okay, all sides. All nice and covered. Now, you don't want to put any liquid in there. If you did, it just washes off all of this spice mixture. It's going to provide its own liquid as this cooks in our sous vide bag. So this looks good. We've got it all over. It smells really good. You get a little bit more on these bones on this side. Okay, and then I mentioned you can put optional herbs in there. I like to put some fresh herbs. My herb garden out there is going crazy. My rosemary plant is up to my waist. So I just picked a few sprigs this morning and washed them. I'm just going to throw this in the bag with them. You could use thyme if you'd like, or any other savory herb that you thought would go with the pork. So at this point, we're just going to put them in the bag and drop them into our immersion circulator. Okay, so as you can see, I have them in my bag here. I've got a piece of rosemary on each side. They've got their dry rub on them. You can see that it's already starting to draw out the moisture a little bit in there, so it's going to make its own like wet rub while it cooks. Now I'm just going to seal this zip top bag here and leave the corner open, and then I'm going to submerge this into my liquid, and it's going to force out this air. Okay, so I have my immersion circulator set at 140 degrees. You could set it at 135 degrees Fahrenheit if you'd like, for a lot more medium rare. Or you could even go up to 145. I find 140 is the sweet spot for me and my family, so that's where I'm going to cook it at. So again, hour, 2 hours, doesn't really matter. It'll hold, and then we got to take it out and finish it. But let me get this in the water. Okay, that's all there is to it. It's get it in the water. I'm going to let it go for that time, and then we're going to take it out when it's done, pat it dry, and then we have to finish it. You'll see in the recipe I've given you a couple of different ways to do that. The best way I like personally is to do it on the grill. I think it gives it a really nice char, some nice marks on there, gives it a little smoky flavor. But I know that's not always possible, even with me, because of weather or for whatever other factors that are out there. So you can also do this in a saute pan, frying pan, little olive oil, and sear it that way. Or you can even do it with a torch. That's the way a lot of the restaurants do it. So I'll put all three of those options in here for you to do. Now, while that's cooking, you've got time. Now you can prepare dinner, you can get your vegetables, whatever you like. You know, it's easy. It's just going on there by its own business. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to make a homemade applesauce, which I think goes great with this brown sugar spice rub that's going to be on our charred pork chop. So let me get that started. Okay, now let's make some wicked easy homemade applesauce. Simple to do, and it's going to go great with our sous vide pork chops. So what you're going to use, and it's very simple, apples, you know, and there's a bunch of varieties you can get out there, different sizes. So this recipe is kind of fluid, you know, regarding the sugar. You know, if you got an apple that's kind of tart, you're going to need more sugar. If you don't like the sugar in it, use less. So it's really like a guideline. And same as with the lemon juice or vinegar. If they're overly sweet, you're going to want to add more lemon. So apples, hundreds of varieties out there. I just grabbed an assortment today. I got a Fuji apple, I've got some Gala apples, I think this one's even a Macintosh. So you can see the different sizes, so how much you're going to get. So in the recipe I put, 1.5 to 2 pounds, roughly 3 to 5 apples. This is just to make a small amount. Double it if you want to make more. And with this amount of apples, 3 to 4 apples here, 3 to 5 apples. You're going to use some lemon juice, about a tablespoon and a half of lemon juice. We're going to put in some cinnamon. I've got ground cinnamon here. If you want to use a stick, you could use a cinnamon stick as well. Just make sure, obviously, you take it out before you puree it. But I'm going to use ground. I don't mind the darker color in there. We've got sugar, and this sugar here is about, a quarter of a cup. But again, maybe you want to put half, 3/4 of this in while it's cooking and then taste it. If it's sweet enough, you don't need to add any more. If it's not sweet, too tart, you could add more. So you can make adjustments, but this is a good ratio. Then we're going to add some water. I've got half a cup of water to go with it to help cook it down, stew the apples. And then I'm going to put a little salt in it. Salt really helps. So we're going to combine all that into a pan with our apples, bring it up to a boil, reduce it down. You can cover it if you want, and just let it stew. Then we take a potato masher and crunch them all up, how thick you want it. You can put it through a food mill if you want it, like traditional applesauce, very, very smooth. I'll put it in a food processor. I like mine kind of chunky, so I'm going to leave mine just with a potato masher. So now we have to cut the apples. So many different ways. You may have an apple core that you can go down through it. You can peel it first, with a potato peeler, and then, go ahead and cut it up. I'm just going to use a paring knife. I start by cutting it in half. Then I cut it in quarters. Okay, then I just take my paring knife and I cut this cores right out of them. Okay. And if it's a big apple like this one, cut it into 6 or 8 little pieces. Okay, I cut the stems out, and then I'm just going to peel it. So I like to do it right over the bowl of the pan, so it saves me a step. Take my knife, get rid of that peeling on there, and then I just cut it through this way. Again, you have another way that works for you, do it. This is just a quick way for me, especially when it's not that many apples. And I'm cutting them into small pieces. Oops. That one's for the chef. That's good. So that's a good idea too. Taste your apples and see how sweet they are. And if you use Granny Smith apples, those green ones, they're pretty tart. Probably need a lot of sugar with those. But there's some apples out there, like the Honey Crisps and things like that. They're so sweet, you know, you probably don't need any sugar with those. So you gotta make adjustments. But, you know, when the apples are in season, whew, you know, there's so many different varieties out there. You can go to orchards and pick your own if you're in an area where they are, and that's awesome as well. And you get different varieties and try different types of applesauce. Okay, so I'm going to keep doing this, and I'll be back. Okay, I've got all the apples peeled and chunked up. They're all here in my pot, you know, and now we just got to add our other ingredients. So as it says in the recipe, you got lemon juice. I'm going to put it all in because I like it a little tart. We've got our cinnamon, sprinkle that around. Sugar, as I said, you can put it in half, taste it. Later on, add more. I tasted these apples. They're not overly sweet, so I'm going to add it all in. I think it'll be okay. We've got our half a cup of water. And then a little bit of salt. So I've got my little salt cave here. Give it a little pinch. And that's good. Okay, so now as it says in your recipe, we're just going to bring this up to a boil, reduce it down to a simmer, and let it simmer, cook slowly for about 15 to 20 minutes. At that point, I'll taste it. If it's soft enough, I'll mash it, and it'll hold. And once this is done, you know, we could use this for this dish as well as plenty of other dishes, or even put it in the refrigerator. So I'll give you some of those options in the recipe as well. Let's get it cooking. Okay, our applesauce has been cooking about 30 minutes now. I just tested one. It's all nice and tender. So at this point, now we can mash it up. You can see, I don't know if you can get a look in there, still kind of chunky. The liquid in there smells great. You can really smell the cinnamon and stuff. So I've got a potato masher here. I'm just going to squish down on these apples, mushing them up. Now, as I mentioned, this is going to be a chunky style. I think it'll go great with that grilled pork chop. But if you wanted this to be more of a puree, you know, like maybe you'd find in the jars and growing up with, or traditional for kids, you can use puree it in a food processor or put it through an old-fashioned food mill. That'll be fine. But I'm going to leave mine kind of chunky here. So I think that's about good. Then let's give it another stir here. Yeah, so you can see it's thickened up quite a bit, but it still has lots of chunks in it, which I think will be really good for our dish. Now, the other thing you want to do is taste it. Now, if this was too thick, you could just thin it out with a little water or apple juice. You know, if it's not sweet enough, add more sugar. If it's too sweet, add a little bit of lemon juice or some of that vinegar. So you can play with this however you'd like. I think it's perfect. It might be a little sweet, but I like it because that char on the chop, that sweetness is going to really work with it. So we're going to put this to the side. And I think our pork should be about due. You know, it's been about a couple hours now. It's been cooking in there. So let's pull that out. Let's get it on the grill and let's plate this up. Okay. Okay, so you can see that spice rub is still adhered to the pork chops, and it has that, you know, sprigs of rosemary that I put in with it. And there's some liquid in the bag, which we're just going to discard. But these are going to be just as plump as when we first put them in that bag. They really don't lose that much moisture out of them. So you can see them here, very big. We got one more on this side. As I mentioned, you could double, triple this recipe if you had a big dinner party, but these two chops are going to feed my whole family. So let's discard this, and then we're going to get them on the grill. But before we do, we want to pat them dry, because we're not going to be getting any good char on them or any sear marks if it's wet. You know, of course, the moisture will turn to steam, and it won't get those good caramelization. And I'm going to hit it with just a little pan spray out at the grill and put them on. So let's go out and do that now. Okay, I've got our chops outside on my barbecue grill, which is going to get some really good char and a good sear. So let's turn those over. Yeah, so now we've got the other side. You don't have to cook them very long. They're already cooked. We're just trying to get the outside to get a char on it. So it's only going to take like a minute on each side. Okay, so our chops are all grilled. You can see the nice char around the edges here on the bone. So now we can just plate it up. So I just have a plate here. I've made some whipped potatoes with some fresh herbs in them. And then I've got a little bit of sauteed carrots we can put on there to give it a little color. So we've got our green and our orange. And there we go. And then you could just take one of these chops if you really wanted to, you know, serve it and put the chop like into the potato here. Maybe like that. Something. But it's kind of big. So like I said, I'm going to feed the whole family. So I'm going to slice it. So we've got a cutting board here. We'll just take this meat, take a little of the fat off on this side. And then I'm just going to put it into some nice little slices. Let's say 3 or 4. Okay, and then we can take these slices and I can shingle them like here. Okay, another one on this side, and then one last one here. So we've got our sliced pork. I don't have to deal with the bones, a little bit more refined. I've got my potatoes and I've got my carrots. Now we don't want to forget about our homemade applesauce. So I have that here. Take off the cover, and it's kind of chunky, so you can put it right down here along the front, almost like a chutney, you know. Now this applesauce, it's warm right now. You could certainly serve it cold, so if you had to make it in advance and leave it in the refrigerator, it's also, you can actually mix it with yogurt. You could serve it as a dessert sauce. So the applesauce on its own is a wicked easy recipe to do, but it goes great with this pork. So we have our nice little plate here. Let me just take a piece of this with the applesauce on there. A little hot. Okay. The pork is so tender and juicy and plump. I mean, you can look at it right here. You can see how juicy it is in here and how plump it is. You know, just by pushing your finger on it, you can see it's not hard at all. So it's excellent. I encourage you to try this at home. Please, if you like this video, share it with other people. Hit the like button and obviously subscribe if you haven't already so you can see more videos in the future. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.